right, welcome to another episode of the WP Crowd. Today we are talking about the tragedies of our past, or past mistakes, I guess. Hopefully a learning experience for everybody here. But let's just start with some introductions. Roby, why don't you go first?
Hi, I'm Roby from Australia. That's Australia with a capital S. I build sites with WordPress. I guess you could say I'm kind of on the beginner end of the developer side of things. But I'm learning.
And you own and operate what?
Don't make me say it again.
Please do. Just once.
The WP Barber.
As usual, I'm Roy. James, why don't you go next?
I'm James Tryon. I'm founder of Easily Amused and head archivist of Wapoos. I make websites with WordPress as well.
And Josh.
Hi, I'm Josh. I'm the lead developer for Caldera Forms. It's a drag and drop responsive form builder for WordPress. It has a cute cat mascot. You can find us at calderaforms.com.
So I'd like to just start this episode by saying we're recording on the September 7th. It's a Thursday. While Roby's in Australia, James and Josh are both in Florida, which is on the brink of getting a huge hurricane coming to them. So, this will go out after the hurricane hits. So hopefully it's still relevant. And we'll
we haven't been swallowed up by this.
Yeah. I'm hoping
that all plans are now contingent.
I would
swallowed up by the angry.
I would be like, hey, my thoughts and everything are going out to everyone who's about to face this horrible storm, but this thing is going out after the storm, so
yeah.
I hope
future
good luck.
At the very end, there's going to be a black screen that says "in loving memory," and it's going to.
Oh no! I really hope that's not true.
I don't want to go. I don't want to be that morbid. So let's just jump over that. Why don't we just start with how long we've been doing WordPress? So I've been doing WordPress for I don't even know how many years now. I've been doing WordPress for a very long time. Roby, how long have you been working with WordPress?
Between 3 years, I think.
Okay. How about you, James?
According to WordPress.org, it's been 10 years now.
Wow. Yeah. And Josh?
A few? 5? 4? Somewhere there, 4 or 5.
So the point of today's episode is actually to talk about things that we've all done in our learning process of WordPress, things that are pretty common mistakes that people make as they're starting to learn WordPress, but they're horribly dumb and should not be done. But we don't know that until we learn this is not the right way to do it. So I'm going to ask everyone to give examples. I'll start out with my first example. I was talking to Roby about it pre-show a little bit, and this is something I've done, but I still see developers do from time to time when they're just coming into WordPress. But WordPress has this thing underneath appearances. So basically you have appearances, you have themes and widgets and all that. And there's this link called editor. And when you click on editor, you can actually look at, view, and edit theme files directly from the WordPress dashboard. I'm not going to pretend I'm all mighty and mightier than all and say I've never, ever touched the editor or touched files through that editor, but definitely seen developers very recently use it. And this is a horrible idea. First of all, we've talked about plenty of different ways of deploying code, through Git, through, just FTP, things like that, other processes. And like the worst case, which, you should never do, is cowboy code. Straight on the server, straight to deployment. And you shouldn't do that. But I think there's like one step after cowboy coding, and that's editing files directly from your WordPress dashboard.
Okay, hold on. I suspect the reason why Hello Dolly is in core is because it makes it easier to do this. Right? Not only can you edit stuff like live on your site, you can also do it without even installing a plugin because you have a perfectly worthless plugin there that you can just turn into what you need.
Yeah, but like when you're editing, like
Totally done this.
like
I
when you're
have totally done it and activated Hello Dolly, and then written stuff in there, just because I didn't want to mess with functions.php via the same method.
but like that's like a whole that's like a whole
I'm
new
not saying
level.
this is a good thing. I'm not saying that like our website isn't managed with Git and like the like dev to state test to live workflow, and we like test things and have like. But I'm definitely going to admit to having done this.
Has anyone has James or Roby, have you never done this? Like, have you ever never touched a file through editor?
No, I have done it.
James?
I've done it when I really needed to fix something quickly for somebody, and there was no other full development stack available. So I wouldn't recommend it, but I totally have hacked a file from there just to fix something.
So, like, the issue I have with this is that it's one thing when, okay, so if I saw Josh doing this, like, granted, I would smack his hands and maybe his face and be like, Josh, what the hell are you doing? But I trust Josh to know what he's doing.
No, don't justify my behavior wrong.
I'm just saying,
You're
like,
my friend, don't enable
I'm
me.
just saying, like, at least I would trust him to know, hey, this PHP file he's editing through the dashboard without a nice IDE or anything, without indentation or anything, coloring. At least he knows what he's looking at.
The indentation gets wrong. Like, I'll make the code right, but what about the indentation?
No. Okay, so I'm just saying, like, at least you know what you're looking at. But this is a horrible mistake, and no one should be doing this. Like, CSS, especially not PHP. Like, I can almost understand the CSS because sometimes with, like, let's say low level, with websites that have, like, 50 plugins installed, sometimes you just can't find that CSS, and you're just like, you need a quick fix. So I can almost understand, like, okay, I'm going to go into this file. I'm going to just inject the CSS and be done with it because I know it works. But, oh, man.
But they have plugins for that. Like, the customizer comes with the CSS access. Sorry, Roby.
I was going to say, here's an analogy. I worked in IT for several years, WordPress. And it's like remote desktop on a server on the other side of the world to fix network issues. If you do one little thing that's wrong, it immediately cuts your connection. You lose access to everything. Like if you do one little something wrong with PA, then WordPress is going to work and you're going to have to find external access.
That's a good point too. Like if you do mess up while messing with a PHP file, you can basically lock yourself out of the WordPress admin and then you're really screwed. So don't do it. Like if you're like listening in and you're just coming into WordPress, either you're already a developer, you're just starting out to do development work, and you're just getting to know where to install, where to put and paste PHP stuff. Even if you know, hey, it needs to go into the functions file, use an IDE, use FTP, use a Git workflow. Don't pretend that editor button doesn't exist. Like I really think at this point, WordPress should just remove it from the menu. But it exists. There's functionality for it. And that's mine. James, why don't you go next? You got a good story of something that you've done that you should, maybe at this point you shouldn't have, but at the time you're like, hey, this is how I learned how to do it.
Yeah, so I started using WordPress in May of 2007. And at the time, all the themes were Kubrick, or the K2, and then we were using Kubrick, so it was the old, like, centered with the blue border outline and a lot of images to whatever, but it to make the whole centered layout. Before there wasn't really great documentation on how to theme or how to do anything. It was just like, here's your theme, welcome to WordPress. And we made some really cool stuff. But we started by just taking the theme and changing stuff. So at the end of it, it looked awesome. It was great. And then a month later, the client updated and the theme was gone because I didn't change the name of the theme from K2, and I didn't build a child theme. Like it wasn't really, there was no real, like, this is the way you do it. It was so kind of new that it was it wasn't super clear. And I mean, of course I had a backup, but and our site's gone. What happened? What did we do? And we had to figure that out. So the learning curve of not setting up a proper child theme or renaming your theme if you were to completely start over.
So I'll definitely admit to doing this, especially with themes, and I've done it a couple times with plugins, where I had to modify functionality of a plugin, and instead of like creating actions and hooks and stuff, which I learned way later on, I would just modify the plugin itself.
Yeah.
And the only way I could figure out how to get them to not update it was I found out where the name was, and I literally put the same name, but I wrote like in caps lock, "Do not update." And it would still like get update requests because everything else was still connected probably like to the repo. But I was like, don't update this plugin. It will break your site because I made modifications to it. I've done that a couple times with the theme as well. Especially when it was Kubrick, K2, Default, and Classic were the themes back then. It was just like, oh, let me just use, Classic. That looks right. And I'll make modifications to it. And then, like inevitably it would get updated and I'd have to FTP up all of my files to override it.
Yeah.
Pretty bad. All right, Roby, why don't you go next? Come on, you got to have a good one.
It's not so much something that I've done. It's more like a site I inherited and I found something that someone else did.
I think that works too. I'll accept other people's mistakes.
But when I initially saw it, I went, oh, that's an interesting way of doing that. And after a while of working with it, I'm like, no, definitely not. So what they did is like, it's a 20-page site. And instead of using the page editor in the WordPress dashboard, they had actually hard-coded all of the page content inside template files individually for each page.
Did they know they were using WordPress? Like that sounds like a pre-WordPress coding. Yeah,
there's a good chance they were like, I use this other system, but it's WordPress. This looks all right. I'll just do this. And yeah, it was terrible. Like HTML markup, inline CSS, everything in the PHP template files. It was.
And every page had a unique template for it?
Yeah. Yeah, you know how you can just put the page slug in the template file and that page will pick up that template. It was horrible.
I don't think I've ever gone or seen that before. Like I've seen like a little bit of that, but I've never seen every page. Like back before WordPress, I would do like site builds where it was like, when I first learned how to do like PHP include, and I was like, sweet, I can include a header file so I don't have to modify the navigation 10 times for every single page of the site. Or I'd have a footer. And then I'm like, hey, I could do this whole thing, but with WordPress, and it takes care of like everything else for me. I'm like, this is amazing. But it's like they learned how to include with WordPress and then like forgot about learning the rest of it. Like they're like, no, it's cool, bro. We'll just do what we were doing up till now with the rest of it.
I think it had the header and footer, but it's just like they had no idea you could do it with like the body of this. Like they didn't know about the content.
It's the C. The C in CMS is content.
Okay, can I speak to a mild defense of this?
No. Yes.
Not at this scale. But like, James, you know this. You helped me with my website. Part of my website is totally static HTML. Like but it's like the front page and the pro page, where to me, like those are not dynamic elements, and it's good to be able to version control those changes. But it's like 2 pages. So I'm never afraid of like on a site to use some stuff just be static because it's simpler and it's faster. But like not like 20 pages where like why are you using a CMS?
Well, I'll give you the front page, because the front page is definitely going to be the most unique page, right? Like you might even have a separate header or footer for the home page. So like I've done that. Like usually my home page is like, bunch of markup, ACF field, include here, get field, and I build out my homepage with ACF fields. But I built out websites for people who really never needed to change the homepage. Like even if they had a slider, they're like, nope, we're never going to change the slider, like once in a millennia. So it was actually beneficial for me to not use ACF because then I could build them again when they wanted to change the slider. So I was like, F it, I'll just leave this hard-coded. But like the rest of the pages, so they could create their own pages afterwards, were templatized. Like, but I'll give you, fine, Josh, I will concede that the front page is a good use case for leaving some things hard-coded.
Yeah, our homepage is technically dynamic now, but I will say several versions has always been hard-coded because we're the only ones changing it, and why waste all the time making all this stuff dynamic if you can move on to something more important? So it was more like, okay, it looks awesome, let's do some really cool JavaScript now and then move on, versus, well, I would really like to edit the alt tag of that image through the WYSIWYG. Like it's not that important. But for a client, we wouldn't do that. So yeah, I agree with Josh. There is some use cases that we have done it. Maybe more for budget restraints as well, on something that's really fancy.
So I've taken this pretty far, this logic. For example, I don't like using WordPress menus, which I like 40, more than that. I like 70% standby. Because again, it's something that I can just change. And and in this case, it saves a lot of query and a lot of complication and a lot of code just to like, on my site, right? Like I don't do customer sites, just to hard code the menu. It removes a lot of complication and lets you more easily do like conditional logic on what's in the menu. Like those filters are a nightmare to work with if you do it the right way. I also tend to hard code sidebars, which I've now realized is completely stupid and I should have done. Like widgets are a real nice concept and I should use them.
You know, the problem I have with the menu thing is like, I totally agree that like, there has to be a way to speed that up. Like ideally there'd be a better way for doing menus that don't require queries every single time, especially if you're not changing the menu. But as a JavaScript developer, for the life of me, I can't ever get current active menu item classes to ever work. Like I've looked at like 50 different ways of implementing, like, so your current page has like an active class on it. It never works, ever. Like I do all this trick JavaScript and it's still broken. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna use the menu because I get that class and WordPress does it for me. And I'm cool with that. But yeah, nav walkers are a pain in the ass.
Dude, I've literally never written a nav walker.
I have. It's not fun. When I first started doing Angular work, I did a nav walker so I could get nav implemented into my like Angular theme V1. Nav walkers are a pain.
I think we've done it for dynamic menus for parent-child relationships to always have the sidebar showing the proper structure.
Yeah, sidebar logic is a pain sometimes. So I usually just create custom widgets for that instead of doing like a nav walker with a menu. Like I'll just do a custom widget with just getting the current page and then finding the children or the siblings if it's a parent. All right, Josh, your turn. I'm sure you have plenty. Just pick one.
Oh, that was my turn.
What was your turn?
I was going further. I'm sorry, maybe I was stealing for Reve, but like, yeah. Like, I was taking it to the extreme of like widgets. You need widgets. Like,
Okay.
And like, obviously, as you know, I've never done anything dumb ever. So I had to go reaching.
Not anymore.
I'm really bad at WordPress is all I'm going to say. Like, I'm really good at making WordPress plugins.
Yeah, 100,000 active installs. Woo!
Yeah. Like, seriously, it's really cool to have a plugin with 100,000 active installs. But, like...
Written by someone who's really bad at WordPress.
Is that every now and then I look at, like, a form I'm working on, and it has, like, it has a field called single line text and a button labeled submit button, and I'm like, oh, yeah, this isn't how people use forms. And, like, I have to, like, go back and, like, make real forms and, like, pretend I'm making a real website. because it's like I make one website.
All right. So I'm going to blast through some of the other things that I've written down that I think people should know, which are kind of basic and I've done it many times while I was learning, but and they're all over the internet tutorials, but things like script tags. If you're just coming into WordPress and you need to implement a script tag, Google WP script. I'll put a link in the description below to the codex. But yeah, definitely don't just paste them into the header file of your theme. Not a good idea. You're not going to have a good time. I would say the only exception to this rule might be Google Analytics, because that's like the one thing I still kind of, and it could be completely wrong. You guys can disagree with me, but for some reason, Google Analytics, I always find myself still pasting it in to the header file because it's an analytics thing. I don't really feel like modifying or creating some crazy action just to paste it in. So
for the noobs out there, i.e. me, is that because you don't always need all scripts on every page?
I mean, that's a really good use case for enqueuing scripts because you can also you can register scripts. So back in the day before enqueue scripts were enqueue scripts, you'd have to register them and then enqueue them. There are two separate processes that went down, and now it's part of an action process, which is actually called enqueue scripts also. And then you actually do the function enqueue script, but you could actually register a script way before, like on init, right? And then during the enqueue process action callback, you can do logic and then say, hey, if it's this page or this page, enqueue the script. I do this a lot for plugins, or shortcodes are a good one. Like if the shortcode's on the page currently, then you enqueue the script instead of having it enqueued on every single page. But yeah, having enqueued also gives you power for prioritization. So WordPress is not known for being able to order things very easily. Plugins are a great example. You can't tell a plugin to load after another plugin. But for some reason, they're smart enough to make it for enqueue scripts. You can set a priority level because it's on an action. And if you want one script to load before the other, you just change the priority level and it'll load before it or after it. Plus, sorry, with enqueue scripts, there is none, but you can tell it to have a, what's it called? Dependency. Dependency management is what I'm talking about. Sorry, I'll have to edit out all that other garbage. But you could tell one script to be dependent of another script, and that's awesome. So again, that's another really powerful thing of not just pasting in a script tag.
Cool.
Are there any other use cases you guys can think of for why enqueuing script is better than just pasting them in?
Well, if you enqueue them properly, I think you can version control them better, or you can target a version, and then I think you can also condense scripts properly, so you have a better, more optimized load if you can enqueue them properly.
Yeah, if you're not having full control of your, like if you are enqueuing a bunch of scripts and you want to use a performance plugin like WP Rocket, WP Rocket will do minification and concatenation for you. So if you have an enqueued script versus a pasted in script, they'll find the script and then essentially combine it with all the other scripts on the page and then minify to make your load a little bit faster.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge one, is like the ability to use something like WP Rocket or that Minify plugin, WP Minify, something like that. The other thing is the query strings that get appended that are for cache busting, right? It lets you do things like if you're enqueuing custom CSS for your theme, every time you do a deploy, you can change that version number and it'll bust the cache, which is great. Like Google Analytics, Google HD tells you to take those away, but like they actually serve a really great purpose. If you can tell like a repeat visitor's browser, like I know you have my CSS, but it's out of date. Get it again.
Yeah, cache busting is important, especially when you're starting to do more of the intricate JavaScript stuff. God knows how many times I've been stuck refreshing my screen yelling at it because I've made changes because I haven't upped the version, or I didn't have version control, so I couldn't cache bust, and so my browser was just stuck on the same stupid cached version. Another one that I've done, and honestly, I would not be surprised if my production site has this on it right now, WP Debug. I love WP Debug because it's a quick debugger, shows you all the current issues going on with your site. It's also a great way to turn on a plugin that someone else built and see how bad they are at coding, and how often they update it, because you'll see deprecated notices. But turn it off before you go to production. As I said, I probably have a few production sites with it turned on because I feel confident in not having errors, and I want to see them pretty quickly. But WP Debug, definitely keep it on while you're developing. Turn it off before you go to production. If you don't know what WP Debug is, again, check the codex for WP Debug, just WordPress debugging. There's two options. There's you define WP Debug true, which will turn on debugging and echoing out the debug, as well as WP Debug log, which will create a log file in your WP content directory. Also great if you don't see an error and you want to know what's going on behind the scenes. Great way to debug your site just with the log on. But yeah, definitely turn at least the echo out part, turn it off before you go to production.
Can I just share an amazing moment real quick?
Yes, share away.
Earlier today, I had a customer come to me with like, something's going wrong and I don't know. And because I built error logging into kind of Airforms Pro, which like I'm so excited about, I just kind of looked at their site and was like, yeah, that's what we're wrong. Without having to ask them to error log. It made me feel good.
Yes, I highly agree. I think, well, error logs and debugging generally, good idea. If you're learning how to code, you're not debugging properly, learn how to debug. You'll actually learn how to code way faster that way. But yeah, definitely do that. Another quick thing I want to mention to people who are just coming into it, .org and .com. Roby, what's the difference?
E3 letters on the end.
Cute.
Good answer.
.com is, I guess, like the Squarespace variant where it's all hosted on their servers and they give you nice, pretty interfaces to work with. Not saying that .org is not pretty, but and .org is the version that you host on your own servers and you have full access to. You can install your own plugins and themes. .com, you're limited to what they offer you. Though I think they are, well, they got new plans now that let you use your own themes or your own plugins or something. They're always changing.
I think they're now incorporating third-party themes and plugins, but I think they still need to be approved. Right. From last I heard.
Yeah.
No, what's really weird is that like it's just regular WordPress hosting where you don't have FTP, but like if you want to upload a file through the plugin admin, like you have to go through a little bit of loops to like get to the WordPress version instead of the automatic version. We got a Calypso, but like yeah, you can just upload plugins if you're on their business plan.
And they don't have to approve them?
Nope, because it's not running like it's like a normal WordPress managed host. Not that weird way that they normally do it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So for those of you who are
that's a pretty good deal.
Yeah, so those of you who are just coming into it, or I'm going to say this is really good for someone who wants to hire a WordPress developer. Learn the difference, because it's not like I'm going to get mad at you or anything, but it kind of irks me when someone's like, oh yeah, so we're going to build a site on WordPress.com, and I'm like, no. You're paying me to build a WordPress.org site. There's a difference. And like halfway through a build, if you're like, hey, I was on WordPress.com and I blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no. Not where we're building anything, not doing anything there. That's completely different. But yeah, there is a difference between the two. Definitely learn what the difference is. One is for us developers, hosting it on your own, or let's say managed host will handle that for you, but it's basically the open source project versus the closed source company, which Automatic runs. So that's the difference. Same more or less project, but there are differences between the two. For example, I think they don't have the REST API because they had their own API for a long time. I think maybe now they have the REST API. I honestly don't know anymore, but I know there was two conflicting APIs for a while because .com had one version. We were building, the community was building the other one that was open source. But yeah, that's it. That's all I have for now. Any other last minute things or last things that you guys would recommend new developers coming into WordPress to learn, or mistakes they should make basically to learn?
Well, I have something that it's gotten me a couple times over the years. And when I put too much faith in my host, I have had hosts wipe out my development environments or staging environments. Now, I don't want to name names, and the names that I won't name now also have backups on their staging environments. So the engines are running much smoother, if you get my drift. But I have lost weeks worth of actual stuff, right? Like I had the files. I didn't lose the files, but like all the data entry, the user profiles, all that stuff that you were working on, just gone overnight. And like, oh, we're sorry, we had a server go out. And that's not really acceptable, but I didn't think to keep database rolling backups of a development environment while doing the data entry QA portions. So like you have the code archive, but you don't always have the client added the copy for the past week archive database. And I might have done that, or I might have not had the current backup or not tested my backup and maybe have had to rebuild a site from the Wayback Machine once or twice. Make sure
backups are hugely important. I know I definitely don't back up nearly as often. Most of my personal sites are on not WP Engine. They're on God damn it, James. They're on DigitalOcean. So now that DigitalOcean offers backups, I'm all over it. But yeah, before that, I was definitely not backing up nearly as much as I should have. But that's definitely something you should learn. And it's not something that like it's developer only either. If you have a WordPress site, you should take ownership of it and do your backups. Hosting in general also, if your site's being slow, I feel like when I used to have a lot of clients, they'd be quick to blame us, the developer, for hosting issues, especially when it comes to speed. And a lot of times it was like, oh yeah, your shared host has, not even a gig of RAM. So let's up that. And now your site's tremendously faster. Or, hey, the MySQL database you're sharing with 5,000 other people is a little slow. Maybe we should remedy that. So yeah, there's definitely instances where the host can play a big role. And honestly, like nowadays, I feel like there's more being put on the host, like security, caching, almost performance is for good hosts. I feel like they're taking ownership of that kind of stuff, which is pretty cool. So if you're just coming into the WordPress realm as a developer, definitely keep in mind what your host does and what kind of platform and what stack they're using, because some of them are amazing and awesome and they care about the speed and security of your site, and some just want to have you have a site up and that's it. So definitely hosting is something to take a look at. Anything else?
I've got a point here. Maybe you can clarify this, but I've had inherited sites before that have a plugin called something like execute PHP in pages. Is there ever really a true use for that?
That's like where you have like a short code. That's where you have like a short code that's like PHP, and then you can like write PHP.
Yeah.
Yeah, why is that thing allowed on WordPress.org?
I don't know.
I get the argument of like maybe it's better to control a bad idea than just to let a bad idea be distributed through GitHub.
Yeah.
That's the length people will go not to like learn how to use a filter. And I don't want to like disparage people because they're not like PHP people and they never wanted to be developers. But sometimes it's like if you want to execute PHP and you're like as long as you're learning how to write PHP, you might as well learn how to use the content filter.
Like, remember how I said there was like cowboy coding, and then like somehow worse than that was using the editor? I think exec PHP in a WYSIWYG is probably actually the next is the bottom of the barrel. Like I don't know if it gets worse than that. Like, cause I've seen pages where like you go to the WYSIWYG and you click on text, right? Or like you can't even click onto the visual mode because it like will mess up all the HTML. Someone's copy pasted into the text side of things. That's pretty bad. But like the PHP one, whew, yeah. I mean, at that point you might as well just learn how to use WordPress. And not how to just like install plugins. Like it's a barrier there, right? There's like, it's someone trying really hard not to learn good things. Like they're like, no, I refuse to learn how to do this properly. I'm gonna go out of my way to not do it.
Hold on. Here's the thing. If you don't want to learn to code, that is fine by me. I don't claim any sort of superiority because I learned how to code and some people didn't. My point is that if you want to write code, then write code. That is not the right place to do it. Like, there's just like you're writing code, have some respect for separation and concerns that like the UI layer is not where you do it.
I wish I could adopt that plugin and just comment out anything you put in between it. Like, just no. Just have the word no there.
No, but like, people use it and it works. And like, it's not that bad compared to like, say, just going in and slapping some random PHP into a plugin on the content, right? Like, it's just that like using
I don't know. Like, I'd rather see the
vector for it just screams like weird like HTTP requests that makes things execute code funny.
I feel like most people that would use it would be like people reading tutorials that say, just copy and paste this PHP snippet into your site. And they're like, okay, well, the WYSIWYG's obviously the only place to put stuff. So I need a plugin to let me put that there.
Yeah,
but that's a train of thought that like that required a lot of thought process. Like, hey, I have to find PHP. So at some point they had to actually find that snippet, right? Then it said paste it into your site. So then they think, hey, where am I going to paste this?
And also because somebody who does support for a living and has for a long time, like the like people when you say like put this code here. One of the big things we did to our website is we made it on any page that has code. It's like, where do you put this code? Because I don't think it's a safe assumption that anybody's been educated, right? Like nobody goes like, okay, welcome to WordPress, but before you do that, like we've detected that you've never WordPress before. This is where PHP code goes.
Yeah, and I think most documentation does, but like
the person who ever said that to someone.
And most documentation does say that, like to the point where I'm like, you know, for me, I'm like, duh, where else would I put it? Or actually, I don't even put it. Usually, I don't put it into a functions file. I put it into a plugin nowadays if that's where it belongs. But yeah, if you see something on Stack Overflow, that's probably where these people found it because they Googled something like, "How do I do this?" Right? Not in any proper form. But like, I don't know. It amazes me the thought process. Like, if I was inheriting a site like that, or better yet, if I was supporting someone that had that on their site, like I'd honestly wonder how they got there. Like, I'm like, how did you mess this up so hard? James, if you're talking, I can't hear you.
I can see the point of it for like, you know, remember when people were like, oh, paste this into your page and now you'll have a chat for some third-party service, but like, I don't know what third-party service is injecting PHP to your site. Like maybe JavaScript, but I don't know. That just makes me.
I've been dealing with XSS security stuff, like cross origin stuff lately with JavaScript. I feel like that's like the PHP example. Like Here, inject this into your site.
Local newspaper, and it all of a sudden it was like the worst article about the hurricane. Like the person literally prefaced their analysis of these really complex meteorological projections with "I ain't no expert." Then I didn't even finish the article because it redirected to one of those like, "Your Android is infected. Download this app from the App Store," because Android clearly hosts that. That isn't nefarious in any way. Right, like that's what happened halfway through because ad networks.
I wouldn't trust the news source that you were reading.
What?
I wouldn't trust the news source you were reading if that happened.
Dude, what is with the New York Times? These networks are terrible.
All right, I think we're gonna wrap it up there. Thank you guys for watching. As usual, if you are not subscribed, subscribe to us on YouTube, the WP Crowd. Hit the like button below the video. Just hit the like and then thumbs up, like. And yeah, share any comments with us of things that you have learned are really dumb, but things you've done throughout the years in learning WordPress, because I'm curious what other examples are out there. Until next week, I will see you guys later. Thank you for joining.